So welcome everyone to Mindfulness of Thoughts. I guess I'll call this session 5. I'm not really sure what number it is. And oh, by the way, welcome to the people that came in during the meditation. Welcome. So today we're looking at thoughts are not facts, which we've looked at before in some different ways. But I really want to explore, what thoughts do you believe? This is really interesting. I thought about this a lot over the last 3 weeks, kind of looking at, for myself, what thoughts I've believed sort of, over time, perhaps even now. And sort of noticing the people around me as well, when stress arose, what thoughts were being believed. You can really see this with yourself, and you can see it with other people around you as well. One thing's for sure is that thoughts seem very real and very significant for the vast majority of human beings. Thoughts just seem like they have this real importance to them, and that they're real, and in many ways they're true. They point to a truth, when in fact their thoughts have no reality at all. They're just secretions in the mind, I call them, but they're electrical. I don't want to get into this sort of the brain part of it, but they're occurring in the brain as events. If anything, we can say in terms of reality is that it's a virtual reality, because it's only happening in your head. Right? It's, you think about, you're thinking about the future. Well, it's the future's not here. All you can do is have a virtual reality about what the future might be. And if the major tech corporations have their way, we may start actually living in some kind of virtual created reality with headsets on, and we'll be able to actually program our virtual reality instead of it just kind of running on its own, as a kind of pre-programmed virtual reality that occurs, in the mind. So you can look right now. Where are you right now? Are you in the now? Or are you lost in thought? Are you thinking, oh, what's Stephen going to say next? Or, oh, is this, thinking, is this important? Do I believe this? And so on. You're kind of in the past or the future, or just kind of lost in the narrative and the commentary in the mind. So all this is mind created. It's virtual reality. It's just unfolding in the minds. There's no past, there's no future except as thoughts in the mind. They don't exist except as thoughts in the mind. And this is very crucial to understand this nature of thought, because the future can seem so real, but it does only exist in our thoughts, as thoughts. The teacher Eckhart Tolle, who's kind of dear to my heart, because I read that book, The Power of Now, as soon as it came out. I think he had produced 1,000 copies of it. Nobody would publish it, right? Have people read The Power of Now or heard of? It's a book by, he calls himself Eckhart Tolle, after Meister Eckhart, the Christian mystic. Nobody would publish this book, and he went around Vancouver and finally convinced somebody to actually print 1,000 copies of it, not actually publish it, but print 1,000 copies. I think more to just to get them to go away. And so he gave out these books, and of course it took off to be a bestseller. And I came across him because a friend I went to high school with was his neighbor, and he had this neighbor that he would laugh about. He was always talking about enlightenment and mindfulness and all these things way back when. But Eckhart had a very powerful story. The power of now. So he was talking really about stepping out of our thoughts. And as I kind of got ready for this talk, I went back and listened to some of Eckhart's talks, and he speaks frequently about thought, being mindful of thoughts, how we create this virtual reality that takes us out of the now. And he's speaking more and more about that. And the practice is really about dwelling in the presence of the now, which is really stepping out of this narrative of the mind, just stepping out of it. Now, why is this so crucial? What's so special about the now? Well, I've had many people ask me, what's so special about the present moment? It's just another moment, right? Well, it's kind of true. There's nothing special about it, but it's allowing us to step out of the virtual reality of the mind. Because you only suffer when you believe the virtual reality. Suffering comes in the form of a single thought. The believing of a single thought. So in our guided meditation, we just look, there's thoughts arising, there's thoughts passing. It could be any thought about the future, thought about the past, thought about whatever. How terrible I am, how great I am, how great somebody else is, how terrible somebody else is, how I wish I had ice cream, how I hate ice cream. I don't know if that's possible. I've never met anybody with that affliction, but it is. There might be someone out there. So the thoughts can be about anything, rising and passing, rising and passing. Doesn't matter what they are. They only cause suffering if we believe them. So that's really what I'd like to explore is what thoughts do you believe? And I noticed in my practice, this was crucial. And as I reflected on it over the last little while, I saw that this was key in really reflecting on this question and seeing directly how it causes suffering. So reflect for a moment yourself. What thoughts do you think are real and significant? What thoughts do you believe? There could be thoughts that something shouldn't be happening. For example, I shouldn't have to wait in this long line. Thought that can arise with impatience, develop into a whole mind state. Or the thought, my printer should work when I click print. I had that thought. I came back from being away. And of course, I turned everything off to be a good steward of the electrical system. And I turned my computer on and I clicked print and nothing happened. I thought, the printer should work. It's just a thought. Of course, I have to turn it on for it to work. That was the next thought. And so I turned it on. Or the thought, my car should start when I turn the key. Or with some new cars, push the button. Or I guess with a Tesla, when I sit in it, I don't know how Teslas start, but I've heard they just start when you sit down. But it should start when I want it to. So there's all these believed, and of course those are just thoughts. But if they're believed, can you see how they can cause suffering? I'm giving fairly simple examples. I'll get into more deeper examples in a minute. There could be thoughts. So there's thoughts that things shouldn't be happening, or there could be thoughts that things should be happening. Or thoughts that you should have done something. This can get tricky, right? Perhaps you shouldn't have done something. That can occur as well, unwholesome actions. But the reality is you did it. So the thought that you shouldn't have done it is meaningless. It's an insignificant thought. And you can learn from mistakes, but believing the thoughts that you shouldn't have done it simply causes extra suffering. For example, I shouldn't have forgotten my friend's birthday. Or I shouldn't have said X, whatever it might be. Or I shouldn't have bought Bitcoin 3 months ago. These are all thoughts that, if they're believed, can cause suffering. Or perhaps thoughts that were not good enough. Thoughts like I do not deserve happiness. I will never get enlightened. Or I'm an angry person. I'm an impatient person. I'm a whatever person. The thoughts that you're not good enough, or thoughts that you're great. Everything I do is wonderful. You could have the opposite kind of thoughts. Or thoughts. Somebody brought this up when I was discussing it as a topic. Thoughts that everyone is looking at you or thinking of you. A very shy person. We were having a dialogue about shyness, and that was a thought train, a thought that was believed that everybody's looking at him or thinking about him. And after we dialogued a bit, he realized that nobody really cares about me. Everybody's thinking about themselves, right? Everybody's not wondering if people are looking at them or thinking about them. In so many ways, we're very self-centered. So what thoughts do you believe? Just kind of exploring this, reflecting. What thoughts do you believe? You can reflect on this in this moment, but I really invite you to look as you go through the day and say, okay, what thoughts am I believing? Especially and you can do it retrospectively. You can do it in the moment, and you might go, oh, there. If you do it in the moment, the suffering just dissolves. You say, oh, there's a thought. I'm believing that thought. As soon as you see that, the thought will just dissolve. It can't proliferate with mindfulness, with it being held, seen in awareness. So you can see the thought arise. Oh, so I'm believing that thought as it just flows through. So you could look at it that way. Or you could look at it retrospectively. A thought arose and I believed, and I'm suffering right now. And you can trace it actually back to a thought that came up, that was believed, and then proliferated into a mind state that was all entangled, emotions and tension in the body, so on. It's all like a knot. And you can trace it back to a thought. To look deeply at your life as a reflection and look deeply in your moment to moment direct experience and see what thoughts you believe. So as I'll keep saying, thoughts will still arise, but the point is, do you believe them? You only suffer when you believe a thought. Now, I don't think we'll ever get to the point where human beings never have a sticky thought. As Jason was talking about a couple of weeks ago, the notion of sticky thoughts, persistent visitors, as Rumi speaks about it in his poem, The Guest House. I don't think we'll get to a point where those don't arise, where divisive thoughts don't arise, thoughts of separation don't arise, when moments of grasping don't come about. So we never get to the point where those kinds of thoughts don't arise. I don't think it's really possible for human beings. Well, those thoughts will arise. What shifts is the gap between the selfing thought or the divisive thought and the seeing through it. The gap gets smaller and smaller. The arising of the thought and the seeing through it happens eventually so quickly that they appear to happen simultaneously. We have this capacity within us to narrow that gap between the arising of the thought and either the believing it or the seeing through it. In this case, the seeing through it. If we get caught by the thought and we believe it, we're caught in separation, caught in suffering. So years ago here, in this human being, there was a large gap between the thought and the seeing through it. Sometimes it would take months to see the truth, to see a thought pattern. And I've talked about these in the past around impatience, how that was a long process of the closing the gap between the thoughts that would arise waiting in a line in the grocery store and then the seeing through it, which took months. So if there can be, this gap can be very large. And thinking back through my past, it was a very large gap. The gap gets smaller and smaller. It gets to the point where you could say, I no longer believe the thoughts that pass through consciousness. So one gets to the point where they're not actually capable of believing a thought. They're not. There's no capacity to believe the next thought that arises. So we don't control what thought appears next in this way, but we don't see the thoughts as real or true or significant. So this closing of this gap where the arising of the thought and the seeing through it happen very quickly. You could call this experience freedom, or you could call it liberation. So I'm not in a place where thoughts never arise, or a place where these thoughts are always and immediately seen through. It's just that the gap is getting smaller and smaller. It gets so small that there appears to be no gap at all. Yeah, so you could say it's about closing this gap. Was it Ajahn Sumedho that spoke about minding the gap? I see it as a gap between the arising of the thought and the seeing through it. And by seeing through it, I simply mean not believing it. You see the thought for what it is. It's just a secretion in the mind. So as I've said in the past, the notion of awakening does not mean that we never have unpleasant or difficult thoughts or illusory thoughts, delusionary thoughts. In fact, the thought that we're never going to have a difficult or a delusionary thought is a delusionary thought. And you know what? All this doesn't really matter. When this gap is so quick, it doesn't matter what the thought is. And if the gap is even quick enough that we don't get caught for very long, there's liberation. Even if it's not simultaneous, if the gap is quick enough, the thought kind of maybe a leaning toward, no, flows through. There's no suffering. Okay, and I'm going to talk about for me, relationships is where the gaps are largest. And I'd like to actually explore this in terms of thoughts and relationships around particularly thoughts around expectations of others in terms of their behavior. I've had the experience recently where some people I've been close to have done things, and the thought came up, oh, they shouldn't have done that. It was one of those kind of shouldn't have done it. And it took a long time to see through that thought. They did do it. Right? It may have been even an unwholesome action, not consistent with right action. May have been a harmful action. Doesn't mean I don't respond. Right? It just means the thought that they shouldn't have done it, that believing that thought that they shouldn't have done it will only add a layer of suffering. And it will actually hamper my ability to respond with clarity. So we really have to kind of separate, because some people can hear a talk like this and go, well, does that mean people do shitty things to me? And the thought arises, well, that was shitty, but I don't believe that thought. So does that mean I have to think that even the shitty thing wasn't shitty? No, you just believe that the thought that they shouldn't have done that is just going to cause you suffering, because they did. The fact is that it did occur. The circumstance is that it occurred. So the area of relationships can be very profound and a deep opportunity to wake up. And I think in some ways, the more we get into this practice and are we're more aware of the arising of wholesome and unwholesome intentions, and allowing the wholesome intentions to proceed, that there can be an expectation that this should happen with with those around us. It's just simply a belief, a thought that can cause suffering. There's no reason that it should happen anywhere else. There can be even the believed thought, and I'll end here, that as a teacher, I'm helping people to be conscious enough that they'll alleviate their own suffering and won't cause suffering in the world. That, as a believed thought, can cause suffering. I don't know why I'm here. And why I'm here doesn't really matter. I'm just here. And when the thought arises, should I keep doing this? I just go, oh, there's a thought. The fact is, when the time comes to do this, I enjoy doing it. So I do it. There may be a day where I stop enjoying it, and I don't know what'll happen, right? So it's more of it's got that sense to it. It's more of a spontaneous enjoyment. So back to the core topic, just to wrap up and open it up for dialogue, is really exploring, what thoughts do you believe? And seeing that it is the believing of our thoughts that lead to suffering. I think first you have to see that. And then you can start to really explore, okay, what are the believed thoughts here? What are the believed thoughts here? And I kind of came to this as an alternative to Byron Katie's, kind of questioning thoughts. She has this 4-step where she, is it true? Is it absolutely true? I can't remember the other 2. I think one of them is what would it be like if it wasn't true? But she's really kind of this challenging of thoughts, just to kind of, so we can prove to ourselves that thoughts are not facts. I'm kind of taking a step beyond that, saying, okay, it's just the believing thoughts, believing that they're true, real, or significant is what causes suffering. So really looking at, what are your believed thoughts? What thoughts do you believe? And looking deeply at your life, looking deeply at your moment-to-moment experience, and seeing these firsthand can be very liberating and revealing, be revelatory in that sense. Okay, let's see what's on people's minds, what thoughts are coming up as questions.
Stephen,
Yeah.
hello. So I've been experiencing suffering. Thank you for this talk. I've been experiencing suffering this week, and then I read your email. I think you sent it this morning, and I thought, perfect. It's really in line with what I've been experiencing. So without getting into too much context, and without speaking for 5 hours, which I absolutely can do, I kind of streamlined it into your topic, which is, what thoughts do you believe? And I noticed that I believe that beautiful and deep connections will cause me suffering and grief. And, throughout the pandemic, as you and most of the people here know, I let go of a lot of the things in the past which would, numb or sedate or help me escape. I released a lot of attachments, and I'm at a really peaceful place apart from the rumination. But I realize that anytime I'm experiencing joy or any form of, anything, I guess, I know there's no hierarchy, but above peace, because I'm just kind of here and I'm happy, I'm okay here. But anything above that I'm not even going to say feels good, but I feel really connected to, I realize, I guess fear is the thing that comes up. And I was writing in my notes here that I experience a push and a pull. So because of this thought that I believe that it's going to cause me suffering and it's going to cause me grief, I try to stop that because I don't want to suffer and I don't want to have grief. So I'll either push that connection away or push that thing away and just cut it out of my life and just, or I'll try to control it. And, so for example, in the case of a connection that I made recently, I was like, well, maybe if I do this, or maybe if I'm less intense, or maybe if I'm, whatever. So in essence, I'm trying to control it without just letting it flow. And then I realized that led to another thought that I believe, which is that I'm not worthy or valuable. So those two things kind of popped up this week. And then so I put a giant circle around what you said, or a few circles around what you said about once you recognize a thought, it'll dissolve. I've been recognizing it all week and there's been no dissolving happening. So I'm just wondering, I see it. And I know there's a part of me that's trying to control it. And the part of me says, just watch it arise. That's what Stephen said. Just watch it arise. Just, don't try to do anything, but it sucks. And I don't want it to suck. And I don't want to be uncomfortable. And then, so I guess I'm just trying to do all the things. So I guess the bottom line is, my thought that I believe is that if I connect with people in a deep, wholesome way, somehow it's going to cause me suffering and grief. So that's all.
Can I ask you a question or two, Ioana?
Oh my goodness, yes, I love it.
Okay. When that thought arises that this deep connection will cause suffering, what happens next?
I try to create a narrative that will make that go away. So either that push that person away or demonize the person. I know that sounds horrible, but that anyway, is that what you mean? Or is there something else?
I'm talking to me in the moment to moment. The moment that thought comes up, what happens next? You said you recognize it.
Yes. I recognize.
If you recognize it, then what happens?
Then I feel really uncomfortable and I don't want to feel uncomfortable. So I try to not feel uncomfortable somehow.
What does discomfort feel like?
It feels like heartbreak and pain and rumination and distraction and disconnection from everything. So I suppose not being present, I suppose, is maybe, I don't know. It feels like a whirlwind, like everything is dark around me.
So how does it feel in the body?
Painful.
Do you feel physical pain in the body somewhere?
I don't, that's not how it manifests for me. I'm cerebral. So it stays here and I can't focus on anything else. I can't focus on my children. I can't focus on anything. What
if you, that moment when that thought arises, you recognize it, and then you went straight to the body? And so, okay, where is this thought? Where is this manifesting in the body, this thought? So kind of take it out of the abstract realm of thinking into a more concrete realm of body.
Okay.
Just try that. So that thought arises, recognize it, see the thought, and then come immediately to the body and just be present for whatever's there in the body. The way I started the guided meditation, where we were just allowing. So no deep breathing, no I'm gonna breathe into this pain here and I'm gonna relax it and get rid of it. None of just simply noticing what's present in the body. There's tingling in the forehead. There's some tension, feeling of tightness in my left shoulder there, and just continually kind of scan the body in that way. Just do it for whatever feels appropriate, and then pause again. The thought comes back, repeat, and let me know how that goes. You can let me know by email or whatever, but try that and experiment with it and see what happens.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah. I was listening to your talk, Stephen, and but I'm also sensitive to the opposite argument, which is that there's no reality out there because we all look at the same thing and we see it in different ways. So we need the thoughts to create a reality because we all look at the same thing. And I mean, my story today was with my daughter. We did something that she has been trying to do for many years that I've been resisting, which was to split my son's ashes. And of course, I am attached to the ashes. And to me, just cut an arm out of the ashes didn't make any sense. But for her, that was important. And she's been living in Halifax for 8 years. She's moving out. She wanted to spread some ashes in Halifax. She was flying in today. We had 3 hours or 4 to do it. I was imagining a ceremony. Somehow we do it with some ceremony. The in-flight was delayed. We had 45 minutes. For her, the ceremony was not important. She just wanted to have the ashes, put them in a jar, in a jam jar, put them in a plastic bag, put them in the plane, and get the ashes in Halifax because that's the last time she's going to be there. So we were both doing physically the same movements, just open an urn, open a plastic bag, scoop some of the ashes into another plastic bag. But I mean, we both looked at it with different thoughts, different objectives. For her, the ceremony was, she didn't have time to do it, that's fine. So I was reflecting that it's our thoughts that give sometimes meaning to what we see. I mean, if somebody was seeing us both, we're both doing the same thing, just scooping the ashes out of an urn or whatever. It's our thoughts and our intent that gave flavor and color and my desire to accommodate her wishes that says, well, this attachment to the ashes is going to end. It's probably not healthy. I did it for 10 years. It's time to move on. And so now you want to spread the ashes, fine. So I was reflecting about it on the way here from the airport. How come we both did the same thing with different intents and different visions and different everything? And then you come here and you ask me to look at what thoughts do I believe in? And I say, well, right on. So I need some help in bridging this gap between the real thing, see the things as they are, and the opposite thought, which is there's no real things as they are. That doesn't exist without our own thoughts and intentions and colored glasses. That's what gives flavor and meaning to an empty reality, which was, if somebody has been saying, well, they are just taking sand from one bag to another. All right, so this, I was thinking about how come we did both the same thing with different backgrounds and different intents, and then you asked me to reflect on what thoughts I believe in, with the idea, you didn't quite say that way, that thoughts color reality as they are, and they distort reality. So try to get those things out of the way. But then if we take all our thoughts out of the way, there's no reality left. So I'm stuck between those two.
Okay. So, yeah, I offered this talk in the at a different level, I guess you could say, in terms of how believing thoughts causes suffering, as opposed to I did go into great detail, as I have in the past, on how we live in a dream state, a thought created dream state, virtual reality, you could say. So the question is, do you want truth, freedom, or
comfort?
Do you want the dream state? And for most of us, the answer actually is we want the dream state. Or at least the dreams, we want our cake and eat it too. We want the dream state, but can some of these teachings make my dream state a little better? But ultimately, we don't want to be, we don't want to give up. The egoic self does not want to disappear. The egoic self, which lives as the dream. So I mean, that's you've hit a fundamental question. I mean, I could ask you, what were the believed thoughts about the ashes, and did it cause you suffering, and so on, but I don't think that's what you're asking me. I think you're asking me, well, what's my life going to be if I don't have believed thoughts? Well, the life for your egoic self is going to be over. There will be no dream state. There will be no egoic self. And so it's the death of the egoic self. That's why sometimes it's being referred to as being reborn. The egoic self dies, and there's a and I don't mean that in the evangelical sense. It's more of a reborn existence. So yeah, I think that's a fundamental question in these teachings: is, do we want to be happy? Do we want causeless happiness, or do we want the happiness that has all these beautiful causes? Right? So, is our deepest aspiration the truth, or is our deepest aspiration sensory happiness? If it's sensory happiness, then you could take this teaching in a much different way. What thoughts you'd kind of say, well, that thought's probably spinning around a lot, and that thought's probably not too healthy because I'm getting a headache. So I should maybe I'll distract myself from that thought some way. I'll listen to a podcast, or I'll, a Dharma talk even, or I'll go have whatever. I'll go for a bike ride or whatever. So we can just distract ourselves rather than really investigating and seeing the truth And what I constantly do here is just keep, I don't know, I just keep throwing truth at you. And, you know, I'm sometimes amazed that you keep coming because it's challenging stuff. It's challenging work. I mean, I don't do these teachings to help you find caused happiness. You know, I could. You know, I could offer a group where you all leave feeling very, very good about yourselves. Anyway, I'm getting a bit off topic, but I hope I touched on the nugget of your question, because it gets kind of to the core of why we're doing this. The core of looking at what are your belief thoughts is driving directly to the truth, so that the egoic self that is living the dream state is dissolved bit by bit. It's transcended. What else is coming up for folks? I love these questions. Yeah.
I was thinking, thank you, Stephen. That was really good. And definitely, I've had the opposite experience of wanting to come back, not running away from the talk. So, and I attribute my mindfulness practices and awareness as being really, really, one of the most important things in my life. And
can I just respond to that, Jason? Because that's a profound thing. We get to a point in this practice where we no longer have control over our lives, where you couldn't stop practicing and uncovering the truth if you wanted to. You get to a point in that practice where that occurs. There's just no way. You can try even, and we've probably all done this. If you get to that point, you've tried. I'm just going to party for a month and forget about this stuff, and then maybe it'll go away, and I'll just be back to my sweets, back to what's that 1985, summer of 1985 or whatever that song is. So, summer of 1969, I guess it is but so we can try that. We just keep coming back. So I just wanted to interject that I think for a lot of people in this group, you're beyond the point of you're no longer in control of your trajectory in this practice.
yeah, for me, it's like food. I think of what you're saying about partying for a month. For me, it's like food. I could stop eating for a week and probably, I'd be very emaciated and feel like crap, but I wouldn't die. I feel I put it on the same level as eating. That's how I feel that the practices are for me. But I think there was two things that came up for me when you said what thoughts come, like what thoughts come frequently, because I've noticed this, and it always seems to come down to these two. One is that for me is things need to be different than they are right now, which that doesn't happen to me very much, but when it does, it's because it doesn't happen very often. When it does happen, it's like, whoa, it's like I've gotten slammed all of a sudden. It really catches me off guard, because it's because I generally feel good most of the time. And then the other thing was I need an explanation for why this thing happened. And I find that I notice that happens with a lot of people too, when like friends, and when they're really going through a hard time, is that they're really like, you know, they're just craving like an explanation for some bad thing that's happened. And that one's less for me. I see other people doing that, and it really I see it causing a lot of suffering, because really, I mean, the only explanation is that really there's no explanation. It's just, we only have this moment right now. And that kind of also speaks to my first one, like things shouldn't be different than they are right now. Well, there's no other time than right now, so it can't actually be any different. But it's still they come in sometimes, you know. It kind of like, it might be like the thought might not be exactly like this, but the underneath the thought that's kind of stuck on is one of these two things for me anyhow.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, the only thing we can know is that we don't know. Yeah. You don't know your next thought. You don't know if you'll believe your next thought. You don't know if you'll see through your next thought. You don't know if the next thought will be so sticky that it'll pull you out of awakening for the rest of your life. You don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We just don't know. So that's all we can really know is that we don't know. So yeah, you're talking about it. You know, everything's going to be okay. Was very deep and really pointed to what you were just saying as well. It's just a, you know, it's just a thought. Is it a believed thought? Somehow things have to be different than they are right now. So many of these thoughts that I talked about were somehow, as you pointed out, are somehow wanting the present moment to be different, or a past moment, or a future moment. So past and future is just imagination, complete imagination, but then present moment, wanting what's already arisen to be different than what's already arisen. Because when we talk about awareness of the present moment, all you're aware of is what's already happened. So you're resisting what's already occurred. That's kind of almost a good definition for insanity right there. Trying to prevent something that's already occurred from happening. And I don't like this moment. Well, the moment you've noticed this moment, it's already happened and ended. All you can do is accept it and move on to the next moment. And which you don't know what it'll be, because the only thing you know is that you don't know what's going to happen next. The only thing you can be sure of is that you don't know what's going to happen next. So any thoughts that you have about what could happen or what should happen, it's all just noise. It's causing disturbance, entangled knots, and tension, stress. How did we get onto that? Oh, Jason, anybody else have any comments or questions?
Is it our human nature that we have to be in control? And once we relinquish that control and let it be, then it'll just flow.
Yes.
Okay.
It's our human nature, and yes, if we let it go.
Yeah.
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 Well, this summer, I've decided to take a mystery tour. I don't know where I'm going, what we're doing. I'm getting on a bus and we're just going to go. My controlling people that I know that have to have a plan for their lives and stuff and have to have a plan for everything think I'm nuts. And I'm there. I've turned the corner because I was the planner. I had to have everything in control. Now I've turned the corner and said, I don't care. I'm getting on that bus and I'm going to go have a good time. Let it take me where it's taking me. So
Yeah. It's a lovely way to travel.
it is.
We love spontaneity.
I have actually changed my way of traveling. I used to have to plan everything every minute, have to know, even if I was taking a tour, I had to know exactly where they were going, what they were doing, what time. Now I go, oh, there's a tour going there. Fine. Here's my credit card. Just pick me up. It's so much easier just to let it happen. Let the divine take care of you because that's what he's there for, or he, she, whatever.
Yeah. And of course, we have to do some amount of practical planning. Like you
Yes.
to
Yes.
show up for the bus and.
But
right?
I understand where
Go into the flow from there.
yeah, I understand where Iona's coming from because I've had to let relationships go because I've been hurt so many times. I don't want anybody in my bubble. And I sort of make excuses not to go deeper into relationships. So I understand where you're coming from. Thank you very much for sharing because those thoughts are those are the worst thoughts in my head. What can I do to make that person like me?
So
Anyway.
I think you've provided a perfect segue into a talk for next week, which is looking at, and I was kind of thinking this as well as is looking at relationships.
Good.
Thoughts and particularly thoughts around relationships. People should behave a certain way. And we can end relationships because people don't behave in the way that we, the thought that they should behave in a particular way. And I've had this happen throughout my life, and we all have. And particularly, I've had it happen very recently. So it's been an opportunity to awaken to that aspect of the Dharma in relationships. So critical to our to being a human being. We're in relationship, we're in connection.
But could that not also have maybe some repercussions from traumas that you've gone through in your life where, because that's like, even today we met someone for brunch and I'm sitting there, I come home and I start saying, okay, did I say the right things? Did I do the right things? I'm sitting there going, at this stage of my life, I shouldn't be worried about that. But you are, right? And it all comes from what happened to you as a child that, because you're always questioned, what did you say? What did you do? So
yeah.
Anyway.
It's definitely affected by trauma, most definitely. And we can look at that aspect as we seem to always, we always tend to be sensitive to trauma, the realities of trauma when we're looking at this practice. Yeah. So we'll integrate that as well as we always do. Yeah. It's time to
wrap it up.
Time to wrap it up. And that's so awesome to be back with you folks. I missed you deeply. I had that thought, then of course I let it go. But anyway. Then I went on my hike. So on that note, everybody take care and have a wonderful week. Be well.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank
so
you.
much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Have a good week.
Night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.